Hello world. In the last video I spoke about 2 years ago, that's 2017, how I was diagnosed with leukemia and um, what happened, the hospital and having to recover, and that I was eventually in remission, which means that they could find no more cancer. One of the things I did forget to mention, which I think I really should because it's important, is the day of my diagnosis, my blood levels and values were so out of whack and bad that I should actually have died that day. So it's only by the grace of God that I'm still alive, and I really thank the Lord that He kept me alive to be able to tell the story. Um, Now, as I ended the last video, I was in remission. I was for more than 1.5 years cancer-free, no leukemia. I was on medication to keep it that way, and I'd started to go through the recovery, started to do more in the house, started to work again as well. I eventually built up to 50% working. I would work about 4 hours in the morning, and then the afternoon I'd rest. In the house, I'd do some cooking, do the groceries, do the washing, try and tidy up here and there, sort of to try and do something. In the meantime, Tesra, my wife, started a study, and we thought all was going to be okay. Now in 2019, April this year, I started to feel sick. At that point, they'd moved my, what was originally a weekly blood test to every 2 months. And things were looking good. And one of the things I would check is the mutation which causes the leukemia, which was being suppressed. They would test on that, and they in April found what they call a false positive. The idea behind that is the test is so sensitive, it detects the mutation when it may or may not be there. So usually they'll retest, and my retest showed again the false positive, which is odd that it would be 2 in a row. So we were starting to get worried. So at the next normal test, we had it tested again, and it came out positive, which meant the leukemia had started up again. We had to go through a bone marrow extraction again, and in that one they saw that my bone marrow was totally full of leukemia cells. It had not yet gone into my blood, but it was enough to start affecting me. During that period, I also got very stressed out, and I have to admit that it really affected my breathing. And it's crazy to say, but I actually breathed my sides and my ribs and the muscles into a horrible pain. So I was, at that point, to try and get this sorted out. What it meant is the meds I was on was no longer fighting the leukemia. It had mutated beyond what the meds could do. So I was taken into hospital, and they put me on what is called the third generation inhibitor. It's a bit more powerful, can have more side effects, which is why they put me in hospital for this, was to make sure that my liver and my pancreas would survive and be okay. Once they gave me the pill, my bones, the bone marrow, pretty much let out all the leukemia cells in one go. That caused me a lot of problems, also a lot of pain, but I reacted well to the new meds. I also got prednisone to fight the leukemia that was now in the blood. And so after about a week, I could go home because the leukemia was battled, and I had responded really well to the new medicine called ponatinib, which was okay. Except the thing was, I was in immense pain, and that had to do with one of the side effects of ponatinib is it takes muscle pain and muscle pain, those sort of pains. It takes it and it amplifies it. So the pain I got from the bad breathing was really bad. Added to that, probably some of the pain was caused from the bones, which had let out all the leukemia cells in one go. So I was at home, a lot of pain. At one point, I was actually taking 6 pain medications at once. 3 were given to me by the doctor. 3, my wife and I sort of added to it that you can sort of just get yourself to try and sort out the pain before we eventually got the pain under control. During that period, I also noticed a pain developing in my in the back of my hip, which was starting to hurt. We weren't sure what that was, so we went for an MRI, and then we found out that when the ponatinib when the leukemia had apparently gone out of the bone marrow, it had caused multiple cracks in all the bones through my body, which was a bit of a scare because first they said that the bones had died, which means you can't survive. But then they realized that wasn't the case because my blood was still responding well, as if the bone marrow was okay. So upon looking at it, the doctors discussed it. They came to the conclusion that it was from when all the leukemia cells were let out. But what had happened is one of those cracks had opened wide, and I actually had a fracture in the hip, which was causing the pain. So I spent about a month in bed with pain. I could do very little. I'd get out of bed, make my way downstairs to get lunch or coffee or something, and then just go back to bed. But after a while, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So I just basically what happened is when we discovered what had happened to the bones, that was a Tuesday. I will admit that was my deepest, darkest day because I came home broken. I mean, at that point I felt like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Pain, the leukemia came back, my bones were messed up, fracture, all sorts of mess going on. And then the Wednesday I was still struggling. To make things worse, without really talking to me, it was decided I needed to do another bone marrow extraction, but this time also with bone, along with the bone marrow, and that's very painful. And that was planned for the Thursday, but the good news was they said they'd do it with me put to sleep, so I wouldn't have to feel it, which was a good thing. And when I went the Thursday to the hospital, emotionally I was different. I just felt better about it. I felt like the doctors were listening to things I'd said because I was struggling with needles. I mean, I've been poked and prodded, and just to put a simple drip in my arm, it would take 4 or 5 attempts before they got it right. I have to get back injections to make sure the leukemia doesn't spread to my nervous system. It takes 3 or 4 attempts before they get it right. And I felt like no one would listen to the troubles I was having, and now it felt like they were listening because they said while I was out for the bone marrow, they do the back injection at the same time. That way I wouldn't know it was happening. I would be relaxed because I was asleep, and they did that. And I went home that Thursday, and I actually felt good emotionally. Now this was also during the Cricket World Cup, and I do enjoy cricket, so I might put videos out of that as well at some point. That's for later. But my wife and I were talking, and I'd actually bought tickets to go to the game of South Africa and Australia, which was that Saturday. And we discussed that, I can spend all my time in bed, not living, which is then a waste, or I've got to do stuff. So I made the decision I'd go with my dad and my brother, and the three of us would go and we would watch the game, even though it would probably be physically hard for me, but mentally it was a good thing. And that was, that week was, as it were, a breakthrough, that I started to do more, that I got out of the house, that I started to walk again, long distances, because of walking in airports is long traveling, and that sort of changed things. So we were now at a point where I was now starting to recover again, started to do more in the house again. I didn't quite make it to remission because as soon as we started to check for the mutation again, I had one negative test, and then we noticed it was slowly drifting up again. Now, as of today, recording, we have had again a positive measurement for the mutation, and we've had a bone marrow biopsy again, and we've seen that my bone marrow is again starting to produce the leukemia cells. It means it's going to have an effect on what's going to happen with my transplant. It was actually planned for the end of September. I've still got a year. If we're still going to try and do it then, are we going to move it closer, move it later? What's going to happen? The good news on the transplant is after years of having no donor, my brother was tested, and he's a match for me, so he's going to become my donor. At least it looks at this point. So we say it's 90% sure at this point. So that's good news. So that's all going well, but we have to see how what we're going to do with the fact that the bone marrow is going crazy again. And so it's exciting times, positive and negatively seen, but we're just going to trust the Lord, believe for miracles, and see what He does. And I'll be taking you along the journey with me. I'll be trying to put up updates as important things happen, and then you can follow and see how it goes. And in a couple of years, I believe that this will be a testimony of God's healing power, His grace, how He helps you and goes with you through difficult times, and that this can hopefully be used to encourage other people going through the same thing, fighting a cancer or sickness, or maybe going through something else, to see that the Lord really will fight for you if you're willing to let Him be a part of your life and have influence in your life. Then He will do that. But I'll keep you updated and post it. And I say thank you for listening. And share this video with friends and other people who may need it. Thank you.